Welcome to Series 3 of The Joy of Writing. I'm your host, Mark Carew, author of 3 novels, and someone who is interested in how other writers write, why they do it, and the fun or joy they get from their writing. My guest in this episode is Tyler Keevil, a novelist, filmmaker, and creative writing lecturer. His 4th novel, a thriller called Your Still Beating Heart, is out soon, published by Myriad. We talked about how he came to write the book, its themes, and his choice of a second-person narrative. Tyler, your latest novel, which is novel number 4, will be published 10th of September, which is this Thursday. It's published by Myriad, and it's called Your Still Beating Heart. I've been lucky enough to read it before publication. It is a great book, a very exciting thriller, so congratulations with that.
Thank you very much.
Just to fill the listener in on what it's about, I'll have a look inside the front cover. It starts with a London bus, a young couple get on board, and then a random act of violence happens. The man, Todd, dies. He's stabbed in the heart, and his wife is widowed, and in response, part of her response is to go to Prague where they got engaged, and then the story unfolds from there. So a really compelling and exciting and interesting beginning. And I wondered, what was your motivation or inspiration for the story?
Yeah, I think there's a kind of a range of things that come together, and that often happens for us writers. I think I remember a student talking about it as being magpie-like, where you're taking various little bits and you're building this creative nest, and that always stayed with me. So I knew I wanted to start with something really grabbing, really punchy.
Yeah.
And I remember there was an incident on a bus where nothing as extreme as what happens in the novel occurred. And I was in London. I kind of felt like a bit of that. We live in small town Wales. It's been a while since I lived in Vancouver, that kind of city feel. And even so, Vancouver's very familiar to me. That's my city. Even if you know cities, you don't always know aspects or areas of other cities. So I felt kind of felt that sense of disorientation being down in London. And an incident occurred that kind of triggered this moment. I thought, okay, well, you take something and you say, well, what if this had happened? What if that had happened? Mm-hmm. And so I played that what if game again, which many of us writers do. And it led to that opening scene in which Todd, the husband figure, dies. And that was kind of a springboard for the rest of the novel. And I think also something kind of maybe thematically of importance. And I look back on several of my other works. They focus a lot on first-person male narrators, and also exploring aspects and nuances of masculinity. And here you have a kind of incident and an instance of somebody trying to assert their masculinity and it going horribly wrong, tragic. And in a way, that was killed off almost in the opening reel, if we're talking in film terms, or in the first act. And that leaves the other character and the heroine, the protagonist, in a totally different situation, and also left me as author in a completely different situation than I'd been in previously. And that was really exciting and really fascinating to begin to explore.
So had you written a female character before as the main protagonist?
Only in my short fiction. I think that's one benefit to kind of working in both forms. That short stories allow you to experiment and try things out and to push yourself in a new direction without committing that huge, massive chunk of time that a novel will take. So I'd had, female protagonists, main characters, narrators in my shorts form. But I think, to be honest, I didn't necessarily have the confidence to pursue that over long form fiction until You're Still Beating Heart. So that's a nice, and a liberating, refreshing change.
And I mean, the story evolves, and the reader won't be able to see it coming. And that's part of the the interest and the excitement. But going back to character, what I really enjoyed was the narration, because you write in second person, and it's almost as if the reader is the character and the author is telling you what you've done, or what you're thinking, or what you're worried about, and also you have some nice foreshadowing and your worries about the future and all the rest of it. And it is very intimate, which is it's more intimate than if you'd said, and then I got on the bus, or and then I did this. How did you get to that sort of style?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent question, and I think it was another risk and another kind of key conceptual point of the whole novel. And initially, I did have the idea that just that opening, I'd read several works, and particularly short stories of Joyce Carlot's, and a couple of those use second person, and I thought I could use that kind of immediacy and kind of the visceral aspect of some of that writing for that opening. And then once the reader was hooked, I might transition into a more traditional style of narration or viewpoint. And I did experiment with that early on in developing the novel. But to be honest, almost you put it very well there, that I felt so much was lost when I then tried to write in another point of view. That kind of intimacy, and also something about second person allowed me to break up the prose a little bit. It didn't necessarily have to have completely traditional grammar, and that was exciting and new for me as well. And those things began to basically move out of the book whenever I changed the point of view. And I thought, well, that's kind of it was a big moment where I had to decide, can you sustain that voice and that second person narration over the course of the novel? And as a creative writing teacher, that's one of the things we always say don't do. Don't write in second person is almost kind of a known or established, one of those silly writing rules, which of course are made to be broken anyway. But I was very aware that it was a kind of risk to undertake. But in the end, it was a matter of writing the whole book that way or not writing it at all. And it did, once I did get into that voice and accepted that that was what it was going to be, it did kind of, it sounds almost grandiose to say it burned through me, but it came quite quickly. The novel and the story began to really flow. And even if I knew there might be potential problems with, in approaching publishers or something, taking a stylistic risk like that, that was the book I was having so much fun writing. It was electrifying and thrilling to write. So I just let it happen and see where it took me, essentially.
Well, you're great. I mean, that's interesting when you say that it was a risk to begin with, and publishers might find second person a risk. But I'm glad you kept with it, because you absolutely nailed the narration.
Yeah, and as you kind of pointed out, that there is a bit of a twist, or a couple of twists later on. Realize the narration isn't quite what you thought all along anyway. We'll leave readers to figure out what it shifts towards. Yeah,
I think people will appreciate these sort of little plays. It's interesting about the narration. You're saying it allows you to get away from more formal language, because if you look at what the protagonist is saying, it's really the thoughts. So it's not necessarily complete grammatically correct sentences. It's very much more like having a conversation with yourself, and you're sort of telling yourself what you've just seen and what it means. Superb stuff. I really, really enjoyed the narration. And then the setting, whether this came from research or experience, it completely hooked me. I mean, I thought, okay, I am in Prague. I am, in other parts of the Czech Republic. What was the case there? Was this from memory or active research?
Yeah, so there was a period in my early 20s, shortly after graduating from university, where I got in my head that I wanted to go to Prague, from Canada, where I was living at the time, and be a writer without quite knowing what that meant. So I saved up enough. I saved up a little bit, to kind of rent a bed sit or a very tiny room, not in a nice area or anything. And I flew out there with a suitcase full of books. So I was hopelessly naive, and but in a way that was part of the point of it. And I wanted the experience as well, as we all do. When we're young. So I would spend a lot of time. I didn't have much money. I didn't know anybody there, so I didn't really have any connections. So I would write in my tiny room, but I would also end up wandering the streets in the cold. So I was talking before about a sense of kind of not being at home in any cities, but that was particularly the case in kind of a autumn and winter in Prague. And that feeling, I think, really feeds into particularly the first third of the novel, when the hero arrives in Prague, and she's at loose ends, and she's wandering streets and trying to overcome or come to terms with her grief before the next portion of the novel kind of takes over, and she moves more towards the journey aspect of it. So I definitely don't think I could have written those early sections without the experience. And that's another interesting thing, kind of as a writer. That was many years ago now. I'm kind of middle age, so probably half my lifetime ago, but it was a definitive experience, and I never forgot. And particularly what stays with you, I think, is the atmosphere and the feeling. Yeah. So you might have to go back and do follow-up research about, details of a particular street, but the images and the kind of sense of the city itself has never left me and never will, and that many years later that informs this portion of the book for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It was very, very interesting to see the protagonist sort of milling about in Prague, and you're wondering, well, what's going to happen? What's next for this person? And I mean, the way you write and the theme it's lends to it is very filmic, and I know you make films. So how does sort of, for example, writing a screenplay or devising, how you shoot your scenes, how does that sort of map over into writing a novel?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I think it connects to something we were talking about before, about the kind of fragmented grammar. An incident that I recall that stands out in my mind, in that one of my short stories had been optioned to be adapted into a film by a director, which was really exciting.
Brilliant! Wow.
A fellow Canadian, and he had contacted me, saying, "Would you like to develop the screenplay with me?" And the treatment in screenplays. So I sent him an example of what I thought a treatment should be, and I had done filmmaking and screenwriting, but not to the level. Not to a professional level, to kind of put it bluntly. And he kind of sent back a kind email saying, yeah, this is a good effort, but this is more along the lines of where treatments and screenplays are at now. And he sent me some kind of striking examples. And one of the things that stood out was basically that my treatment was much too prose-like. It was still kind of stuck in a kind of writerly mode. And that's where I think some of the fragment sentences and the kind of just the short, sharp images of Your Still Beating Heart came from, was in kind of being told to adjust my style by that director, and to kind of, in working on the treatment adaptation for this other short story, that kind of then carried forward. And it was liberating and freeing, and screenplays are kind of beautifully streamlined, just those kind of snippets of setting, flashes of imagery, and then really short cutting dialogue. And I think that obviously wouldn't translate to every author's work or every novel that I've written, because we can do many things that screenwriters can't and that films can't. And I think there is a danger of becoming overly, cinesaturated, where you're just trying to write a film in book form.
Right.
But it definitely suited what I intended for You're Still Beating Heart, and it really felt like, okay, this is going to work, and helped kind of carry the story as well. Yeah,
it's much more follows the way the mind works, I suppose. I mean, the mind doesn't work in complete sentences. It works in images and ideas and feelings and emotions.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. I hadn't actually thought of that so much but I think you're absolutely right. Intuitively, that's what kind of also carries, because external visual cinematic aspects, but then there's also that same style carries on when the heroine is thinking to herself, or like you said, considering angles, and it's very much a kind of game of cat and mouse in the second half, when she's having to outguess and outthink what the pursuers are doing. Like you said, having kind of conversations about, well, could they do this? Should I do that? What's next for me?
Yeah, I mean that's excellent. That was very exciting, because you conjure up this always present aspect of dread, because you're really rooting for the protagonist here, because of what she's doing, and we'll leave that to the listener and the reader to find out. But you really want her to, get away. Yeah. So that sort of fragment, it always reminded you. It's like somebody sort of poking you, saying, "You're not out of this yet." Which was really, really good. I mean, you were really invested in the character, and because of the way the narration worked, you felt that you were to some extent, very much the character. So that was good. One of the overwhelming themes I got, if you had to put a theme to it, was this idea of going back to the incident on the bus, that death is easy. Death can happen to us all very in random moments, or it can come, when it comes, and life can be very hard. And one of your reviewers on the back mentions the word depravity. So you have this sort of battle between life and death, and depravity, treating people for little much more than that's just a person, and versus sort of the love and the urge to protect and save people. Were those the themes you were shooting for, or was that something else going on?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think definitely there, and I think there's kind of multiple themes working together, and you've covered them, really eloquently there. That idea of random death, and I think the idea of the central conundrum of our existence, of how much we like to believe, there's a rhyme or reason. And how much it is just kind of chaotic. I was definitely looking at that, exploring that, and images of that those are kind of thoughts that crop up in the protagonist's mind, where she's saying, am I meant to be here? Has what happened back on that bus in London led me here? And am I able to, and almost fated to, or inevitably to, save this other person? That's kind of becomes a big part of it. The idea of self-sacrifice, or putting yourself at risk for another. It's not just about her, but that it's about, like you said, the idea of protecting, and then pitting that against the evil. And that's the word for it, evil. What her pursuers are up to, and I don't think you can think of it's kind of a horrible fate that they have in store for this person and for an innocent. And I think those questions of morality, and of good and evil, and also the decisions we make and the actions we take that define us, and of course maybe lurking behind that with the kind of twist and point of view, this understanding that, or consideration of, we all like to think we would make the decision she does, and that when pressed, that we would do the right thing and have the strength to do what she does. But of course, life is more complicated than that, and we grapple with our own weakness and our own cowardice as well, and that's a part of human nature too, and that can allow evil to happen. I think if all of us have the temptation sometimes to look the other way. We don't want to be involved. We don't want to take a stand, because that's putting ourselves at risk. Then there's no easy answer to those questions, but I think those themes are definitely kind of prevalent and were at the forefront of my mind while writing it.
You took your character, and that old advice of, you want to know what your character is made of, then put them in a difficult situation. Well, you really asked a very important question to your character, which was, if for evil to prosper, good people do nothing. And it was very much like Todd on the bus, who died, and he was protecting his wife, and now that same sort of question comes round to your protagonist, what are you going to do, really?
Yeah.
And it's a super tough question, but it's how you respond is the measure of you. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to fight for. It was very high stakes, very high intensity, exciting stuff. I really, really enjoyed it for the actual story and the way you wrote it. As a writer, I enjoy looking at how this was done, and this was hugely impressive. So, good luck for Thursday when it comes out.
Thanks very much, Mark. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Look forward to speaking again after publication.
That'd be great. Yeah, I look forward to it too.
Next episode, we will hear Tyler's reaction to publication of Your Still Beating Heart and how he was getting on with future books. You can leave feedback on any of the episodes at podchaser.com/The Joy of Writing or wherever you listen to your podcasts.